Hello everyone, my name is Madison Bravo and I'm going to be doing my presentation on Helen, Bradford, Thompson, Woolley and her book, The Mental Traits of Sex. To start off, we will cover 4 topics, starting off with a little introduction, then moving into some background and information on her education, then talking a little bit about the book that she wrote, finishing off with connections to the class topics we've covered and modern psychology. Woolley was born to middle-class parents Paul Thompson and Isabel Perkins Faxon on November 6, 1874 in Chicago, Illinois. Her upbringing was one of a middle-class child, and she had opportunities in education. Her mother worked as a missionary for the church, and her father, Paul, was an inventor. From an early age, Thompson Woolley announced that she would never go into missionary work and decided to pursue a more scientific field like her father. Her father, an inventor, went on to create inventions such as the burglary alarm, a letter sorting device, and a thermostat that regulated heat from coal furnaces. Woolley was inspired by her father's scientific pursuits and decided to attend further education. Woolley knew that she would need a scholarship in order to attend college. Her older sister had previously attended college, but due to lack of financial aid, had to drop out of school. Because of these reasons, Woolley decided to work hard in school and ultimately became her high school valedictorian. Because of her hard work, she was awarded a scholarship from the University of Chicago, where she enrolled in the Department of Philosophy, Psychology, and Pedagogy, which had recently been established by psychologist John Dewey, which we talked about earlier. Fascinated with empirical psychology, she worked with the likes of James Angell, George Mead, John Dewey, Henry H. Donaldson, and James H. Tufts as she went through her undergraduate work. Woolley graduated from her undergrad in 1897 and took a departmental scholarship to work with James Angell. She wrote her PhD dissertation on the differences between the mental capabilities of the sexes. Her dissertation was republished in 1805 by the University of Chicago Press as a book entitled The Mental Traits of Sex. This was arguably her most famous work. At the time of Woolley's research, previous thinking towards the topic of differences in the mental capabilities of the sexes held the belief that women's intelligence did not compare in quantity and quality to that of men's intelligence. Woolley argued that these theories were speculative and had no empirical basis. Woolley set off to prove whether physical dimensions could really correlate with the intellectual performance of the sexes. In her work, The Mental Traits of Sex, Woolley notes that the goal of her research was to attempt to acquire a complete and coherent body of principles that demonstrated the psychological similarities and differences between the two sexes through experimental methods. Previous work on the differences between sexes focused only on experiments of children under the lens of studying child behavior. As a result, this work was the first of its kind. To conduct these tests, Woolley felt strongly that it was important to choose participants that were similar in age, social status, training, and social surroundings. Students from a co-educational university would be the closest fit to those constrictions. Students from the University of Chicago in their third, fourth year, or first year of undergraduate work, or of graduate work, from the University of Chicago were selected to participate in the study. The age range of participants ranged from 19 to 25. Participants were not told the purpose of the study except that they were there for the purpose of determining psychological norms. The tests were broken down into 7 sections: motor ability, skin and muscle senses, taste and smell, hearing, vision, intellectual faculties, and affective processes. Based on the results of her tests, Woolley acknowledges biological differences between the sexes, but states that this does not affect their mental capabilities. Women can learn topics that are considered male topics of education, and men can learn topics of education that had been previously thought only suited for women. Woolley notes that early restrictions that have been placed on both sexes from a young age could have been influences in their learning and functioning. As a result, it is not biological science that determines mental capabilities, but instead the ideology of gender at the time. To expand on her point, Woolley references a popular theory that uses the shape and size of the male and female reproductive cell to represent their respective gender roles in society. The female egg is seen as large and immobile and represents stored energy. A woman's place was seen in the home, and women were not encouraged to be active and go outside. They were supposed to run the home and create a warm, inviting space for men to come back to. The male sperm is small and agile and represents the expenditure of energy. Men were encouraged by society to go out and make a place for themselves. They are the ambitious people and the ones that would advance society forward. However, Woolley notes that it would make more sense if these descriptions were reversed. The man, the strong protector of the world, should have the large and immovable sex cell, while for women the small, delicate, fragile nature of the sperm would better fit society's view of women. Through this point, Woolley acknowledges that the theories of sexual differences are not based on pure empirical data, but instead speculative assumptions. If gender roles were suited for us from a biological standpoint, then there would not be as much pushback on these restrictions. Woolley was noted to be a well-respected and admired psychologist for her time, and her work demonstrates the influences of those that came before her. Woolley was closely related to many of the functionalists that were mentioned in recent lectures. It was said that she impressed professors including John Dewey, the founder of the psychology department at the University of Chicago, so much that she was the only student awarded summa cum laude for many years, much to the chagrin of fellow student John B. Watson. Woolley was also known with having a close relationship to her professor James Angell, who was credited in the introduction of her work, The Mental Traits of Sex, with giving her the idea to study gender differences in the first place. In her work, she also references work and research done by functionalists Angell and Galton. In a broader sense, Woolley's work changed the field of psychology by utilizing newly developed statistical methods and a strict standard for selecting her participants. This set her work apart from others of this time. Her research would go on to inspire other innovative studies that would help to develop the field of gender psychology and change thinking about the mental capabilities of sex forever. However, Woolley and her story within the field of psychology also points out some of the negative sides of the field. Despite her work being important and its methodology being the first of its kind, she is seldom mentioned. Woolley's later work in the fields of school psychology and child psychology point to a historic problem in which female psychologists are placed in limited and restricted fields of research. This point is further demonstrated in the fact that Woolley struggled to find careers in higher education throughout her life. Those that she was able to find were at all-female colleges such as Mount Holyoke College for Women, where she taught for a majority of her life. Woolley's own struggle with her mental health and the abandonment by both the fields and her friends point to a lack of support that early female psychologists received. Ultimately, the work of Helen Bradford Thompson Woolley deserves to be remembered in the field of psychology. To finish off this presentation, I chose this quote from Woolley because I felt like it summed up the skeptical nature Woolley was said to have had. Thank you for listening to my presentation.